I was standing at the kitchen counter with a coffee mug in one hand and the morning paper in the other. It was a Tuesday. Nothing special about it. The sun was coming through the window over the sink the way it always did, and I remember thinking I should wash that window because there was a smudge right in the middle that had been there for weeks. I was going to do it that afternoon. I had a list. That was the kind of man I was. A list man. Groceries on Monday, trash on Tuesday, wash the kitchen window on Tuesday afternoon. My whole life had been lists and schedules and showing up on time and doing what I said I would do. I thought that was how you built a family. I thought that was how you earned the right to grow old and be loved. My wife had left for her book club an hour earlier. She kissed my cheek and said she would be back by noon. She smelled like that lavender lotion she always used, and I watched her walk out the door, and I thought about how lucky I was. 42 years of marriage, 2 kids, 5 grandkids, a house that was paid off, a pension that came every month. I had done it. I had built the American dream with my own 2 hands and my own sore back and my own sleepless nights. I was 68 years old, and I thought I had earned the right to drink my coffee slow and read the paper and wash a damn window. My son was supposed to come over that evening. He had called me the night before and said he needed to talk about something important.
He sounded strange on the phone. Not angry, just strange, like he was reading from a script. I asked him if everything was okay, and he said, "Yeah, Dad, everything is fine. I just need to go over some paperwork with you." Paperwork. That word should have set off alarms in my head, but it didn't, because my son was a lawyer. He always had paperwork. That was his whole life. Contracts and clauses and signatures. I was proud of him. I told everyone about him. My son, the lawyer. My son who bought his own house at 30. My son who married a woman with perfect teeth and perfect hair and a smile that could light up a room. I thought I had done everything right. I sat down in my recliner with the coffee and the paper. The front page was all politics, and I skimmed it without really reading. I turned to the sports section. That was my routine. Coffee and sports, and then the crossword if I felt like it. The phone was on the end table next to me. It buzzed around 9:30. I picked it up, and it was a text from my son. I smiled. He was probably confirming what time he would come over. I opened it, and I read it, and the first thing I felt was confusion. The second thing I felt was nothing. The third thing was something I cannot describe because there are no words for the moment when your heart stops believing in your own life. The text said, "I am not coming over tonight. I have something to tell you, but I cannot do it in person. The house is in my name now. It has been for 3 years."
You signed the papers. You don't remember because you were sick, and Mom told you it was a refinance. She had me take you to a lawyer, and you signed everything. I am sorry, but I need to sell the house. I need the money. You have 30 days to get your things out. I read it 3 times. The words did not change. The house is in my name now. You signed the papers. You were sick. Mom told you it was a refinance. 30 days. I set the phone down on the armrest of the recliner and I stared at the wall. The wall was beige. I had painted it beige 12 years ago. I remember buying the paint at the hardware store. I remember my son was with me. He was in high school then. He helped me carry the paint cans to the car. We were laughing about something. I do not remember what. That day felt like 100 years ago. That day felt like it happened to someone else. I picked up the phone again. I read the text again. It was still there. It was real. My son had just told me over a text message that I was losing my house. The house I had worked 30 years to pay off. The house where I raised him. The house where his mother and I slept in the same bed for 42 years. The house where he learned to ride a bike in the driveway. The house where we had Christmas dinners with the whole family around a table I built myself. That table was still in the dining room. I had built it out of oak in 1987. I remembered sanding the edges until my fingers bled. I remembered staining it in the garage while the kids were asleep. I remembered my wife coming out with a cup of coffee and saying it was beautiful. That table had held 1,000 meals. That table had held birthday cakes and Thanksgiving turkeys and Easter hams and my daughter's wedding cake. That table was where my son told me he was going to law school. That table was where my daughter told me she was pregnant with her first child.
That table was where I had sat every single night for 3 decades and looked at the faces of the people I loved. Now that table was going to be sold to a stranger. The phone buzzed again. It was my son calling. I stared at the screen. His name was there. The same name I had given him. The same name I had whispered to him when he was a baby in my arms. The same name I had shouted across the football field when he scored a touchdown. The same name I had said with pride at his college graduation. He was calling because he knew what he had done. He knew the text was a coward's move. He knew he had to hear my voice. I let it ring. I let it ring 7 times. Then I answered. He said, "Dad." Just that one word. Dad. Like he had said it 1,000,000 times. Like he had said it when he was 5 years old and scared of the dark. Like he had said it when he was 16 and needed money for a date. Like he had said it when he was 25 and his wife was in labor and he needed me to drive him to the hospital. He said, "Dad," and his voice was shaking.
He said, "I know you are angry, but please let me explain. I did not say anything. I could not say anything. My voice was gone. I opened my mouth and nothing came out." He kept talking. He said, "Mom and I talked about this a long time ago. She knew. She knew the whole time. She helped me file the papers. She brought you to the lawyer. She told you it was a refinance, and you believed her because you trusted her. You trusted everyone, and that was your problem. That was your problem." He said those words, "Your problem." I was 68 years old, and my son was telling me that my trust was a problem. The same trust that had kept him fed and clothed and educated and loved. The same trust that had paid for his braces and his school trips and his car insurance and his law school tuition. The same trust that had held my hand when my own father died. The same trust that had made me stand up in front of a room full of people and say I would love his mother until I died. That trust was a problem. I finally found my voice. I asked him why. Just one word. Why? He said, "Because we need the money. We have debts. We made bad investments. We are going to lose our own house if we don't sell yours. We need the equity. It is the only way." He said we. He and his wife. My daughter-in-law. The woman with the perfect teeth and the perfect smile who had hugged me every Thanksgiving and called me the best father-in-law a girl could ask for. She was in on it. She had sat at my table and eaten my food and smiled at me while knowing that she was going to help take everything I owned. I asked him how long. How long had they been planning this? He said 3 years. 3 years since my heart surgery. 3 years since I was weak and drugged and confused. 3 years since my wife had driven me to a lawyer's office and handed me a pen and told me it was just a refinance. 3 years of my wife kissing me goodnight and cooking my dinner and holding my hand at the movies while knowing she had just signed away my house. I hung up. I did not say goodbye. I just pressed the red button and stared at the wall again. The beige wall. The wall I had painted with my son. I remembered now. I remembered what we were laughing about. He had spilled paint on his shoes, and I told him it was okay because they were ugly shoes anyway. He had laughed so hard he almost dropped his roller. That was the same boy who just told me I trusted everyone, and that was my problem. That was the same boy who had just given me 30 days to get out. I sat in the recliner for an hour. Maybe 2. I do not know. The coffee went cold. The paper fell to the floor. I did not pick it up. I just sat there and tried to understand how my life had become this. I thought about my wife. I thought about her leaving this morning. She kissed my cheek. She smelled like lavender. She said she would be back by noon. She knew. She had known for 3 years. She had gone to bed next to me every night, and pretended everything was fine. She had let me talk about our retirement plans. She had let me dream about the trip we were going to take to the Grand Canyon. We had talked about that trip for years. We were going to rent an RV and drive across the country and see all the things we had never seen. She had let me buy a guidebook. She had let me mark the route with a highlighter. She had watched me do all of that, and she had never said a word. She had known the house was going to be sold. She had known we were going to lose everything, and she had let me keep dreaming. I got up from the recliner. My legs were shaky. I walked to the bedroom, our bedroom, the room where we had made love and fought and cried and laughed and slept for 42 years. I opened her closet. I looked at her dresses. She had so many dresses. She loved dresses. She wore them to church and to dinner and to the theater and to the grandkids' birthdays. I reached out and touched one. It was blue. She had worn it to my 60th birthday party. She had looked beautiful that night. Everyone told her she looked beautiful. She had danced with me in the living room. I remembered her head on my shoulder. I remembered her hand in mine. I remembered thinking, I am the luckiest man alive. That was 8 years ago. That was before she started lying to me. I walked back to the kitchen. I opened the drawer where we kept the important papers, the deed, the mortgage,
The insurance policies, the will. I looked through everything. The deed was gone. The mortgage papers were gone. There was just a copy of a document I did not recognize. It was a quitclaim deed. It had my signature on the bottom. It had a date 3 years ago. My signature was shaky. It looked like the signature of a man who could barely hold a pen. That was because I had barely been able to hold a pen. I had just come home from the hospital. I was on painkillers. I was groggy. I was confused. My wife had told me to sign a refinance document. She had put the pen in my hand and guided it to the paper. She had told me it was important. She had told me it would save us money. I had signed without reading it because I trusted her. I had signed because she was my wife and I had loved her for 40 years, and I never thought she would do something like this. I sat down at the kitchen table, my table, the one I had built. I ran my hand across the surface. I felt the grooves I had sanded. I felt the little imperfections. I remembered every hour I had spent on this table. I remembered the music I was listening to. I remembered the smell of the stain. I remembered my son coming out to the garage and asking what I was making. I told him, a table for our family. He asked if he could help. I said yes. He put his little hands on the wood and tried to push the sandpaper, but he was too small. He got frustrated and started crying, and I picked him up and hugged him and told him it was okay.
I told him someday he would build a table of his own. I told him that was what men did. They built things. They built tables, and they built houses, and they built families, and they built trust. I did not know then that he would one day take everything I built and sell it to the highest bidder. I called my daughter. My daughter lived 3 states away. I had not seen her in almost a year. She was busy with her career and her kids and her own life, and I understood that. I called her and she answered on the second ring. She said, "Hey Dad, what's up?" Her voice was bright. She sounded happy. I asked her if she knew. I asked her if she knew about the house. There was a long silence. Then she said, "I heard something about it, but I did not want to get involved." I said, "Get involved?" She said, "Dad, you know how Dave and I are struggling. We cannot afford to help you." I said, "I am not asking you to help me. I am asking you to tell me if you knew." She said, "I found out 6 months ago. Mom told me. She said it was a business decision. She said you would understand." I asked her if she thought I would understand. She said, "Dad, I love you, but you have to be realistic. You are older now. You do not need a big house. You can move into an apartment. You will be fine. You will be fine." That was my daughter.
The girl I had held in my arms in the hospital when she was born. The girl I had walked down the aisle at her wedding. The girl I had given away with tears in my eyes.
The girl I had called every Sunday for 30 years. She said I would be fine. She said it like I was a houseplant that could just be repotted. She did not understand. She could not understand. The house was not just a house. It was my life. It was every memory I had. It was every moment I had worked and sacrificed and bled. It was the walls that had heard my laughter and my tears and my prayers. It was the roof that had sheltered my children on stormy nights. It was the yard where my grandchildren had played and chased fireflies and fallen asleep in the grass. I hung up on her too. I hung up on my own daughter. I could not listen to her anymore. She was so calm. She was so logical. She had already moved on. She had already accepted that I was going to be thrown out like trash. She had probably already decided what she would take from the house before I was gone. That was the thing that broke me. My own children. The two people I had loved more than anything in the world. They had both known. They had both accepted it. They had both decided that I did not matter. I went back to the recliner. I sat down and I looked at the phone. I thought about my wife. I thought about her coming home at noon. I thought about what I would say to her. I thought about 42 years of marriage and how it could all end in a single conversation. I thought about the way she smiled at me. I thought about the way she held my hand. I thought about the way she told me she loved me every single night. Was any of it real? Had any of it ever been real? Or had she just been waiting? Waiting for the right moment? Waiting for me to get sick? Waiting for me to be weak? Waiting to take everything and leave me with nothing? She came home at noon. I heard the door open. I heard her keys in the bowl. I heard her footsteps in the hall. She called out my name. She said, "Honey, I am home." She said it the same way she had said it for 42 years. I did not answer. She walked into the living room, and she saw me sitting in the recliner, and she saw my face. She knew immediately. The color drained from her face. She started to say something, and then she stopped. She stood in the doorway, and she looked at me, and she looked at the floor, and she looked back at me, and she said, "I can explain." I said, "No." I said, "You cannot explain. You can say words, but you cannot explain why you did this." She said, "I was scared." She said, "I was scared of losing him." She said, "Our son came to me 3 years ago and he told me he was in trouble and he needed our help and I did not know what else to do." I said, "You could have told me." I said, "We could have figured it out together." She said, "You were sick." She said, "You were so sick and I could not bear to put more stress on you." I said, "So you decided to take my house behind my back." I said, "You decided to lie to me for 3 years." I said, "You decided to turn my own children against me." She started crying. She always cried when she was caught. It was her defense mechanism. I had seen it 100 times. She would do something wrong, and then she would cry, and I would forgive her because I could not stand to see her cry. But this time, it did not work. This time, I just watched her. I watched her tears fall on her dress. I watched her face crumble, and I felt nothing. I felt completely empty. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and pulled out my heart and thrown it in the trash. She said, "Please." She said, "Please let me try to fix this." I said, "There is nothing to fix. The house is gone. The deed is signed. My own son took it from me, and you helped him." She said, "Maybe we can stop the sale." She said, "Maybe we can talk to the lawyer." I said, "The lawyer you took me to when I was drugged? The lawyer you paid to rob me? That lawyer?" She stopped crying. She looked at me, and for the first time in 42 years, I saw a stranger in her eyes. She was not my wife anymore. She was a woman I did not know. She was a woman who had made a choice, and that choice was my son over me.
She had picked him. She had picked him 3 years ago, and she had been picking him every single day since. I did not yell. I did not scream. I just got up from the recliner, and I walked past her, and I went to the garage. I needed to get out of that house. I needed to be somewhere that did not smell like her lavender lotion.
I went into the garage, and I closed the door, and I sat on the workbench. It was dark in there. I liked the dark. The dark could not lie to me. The dark was simple. I looked at my tools hanging on the wall, my wrenches and my hammers and my saws. I had fixed everything in that house with those tools. The leaky faucets, the broken drawers, the squeaky doors. I had fixed everything, except my own family. I could not fix them. I could not fix the hole they had carved in my chest. I sat there for a long time. I did not cry. I could not cry. I was too empty for tears. I just sat and stared at my tools and thought about the life I had built and the people who had destroyed it. My son called me again that night. I did not answer. He left a voicemail. His voice was shaking. He said, "Dad, I am so sorry." He said, "I never meant for it to go this way." He said, "I was desperate." He said, "I have been under so much pressure." He said, "I love you and I never wanted to hurt you." He said, "Please call me back. Please talk to me." I listened to the voicemail and I felt nothing. That was the scary part. I felt nothing. I had loved that boy more than anything in the world. I had loved him since the day he was born. I had held him in my arms and whispered his name and promised to protect him forever. And now he was just a voice on a phone. A voice that had taken everything from me, and then called to say he was sorry. Sorry was a word. Words did not mean anything anymore.
I had spent my whole life believing in words. I had believed in promises and vows and declarations of love. I had believed that when someone said they loved you, they meant it. I had been wrong. Love was not a promise. Love was a transaction. Love was something you gave and someone else took, and then they walked away, and you were left with nothing. The next day, I called a lawyer. I found one in the phone book, a real estate lawyer. I drove to his office, and I sat in his waiting room. The chairs were hard, and the walls were white, and the receptionist had a bored face. I told the lawyer my story. I told him everything. He listened, and he nodded, and he took notes. When I was done, he said, "I am sorry, but there is nothing you can do. You signed the document. You were under the influence of medication, but proving that is almost impossible. The court will say you were competent enough to sign. They will say you had the mental capacity to understand what you were doing." I said, "I did not understand. I was on painkillers. I could barely walk." He said, "I know, but the law does not care. The law cares about signatures. Your signature is on that document. That document says you transferred the property to your son. There is no way to undo it." I walked out of that office and I sat in my truck and I stared at the steering wheel. My truck was old. It was a 2002 Ford. I had bought it new. I had driven it to work every day for 10 years. I had driven it to my children's school plays and their soccer games and their college visits. I had driven it to the hospital when my wife had surgery. I had driven it to the cemetery when my mother died. That truck had been with me through everything, and now it was the only thing I had left. I drove home slowly. I did not want to go home. Home was not home anymore. Home was a place where I was not welcome. Home was a place where I was a guest in my own house. I pulled into the driveway and I sat in the truck for a long time. The house looked the same. The white siding, the black shutters, the little garden my wife had planted in the front yard. It looked the same, but it was not the same. It was a shell. Everything inside it was a lie. My wife was waiting for me in the kitchen. She had made dinner. She always made dinner. She was standing at the stove with a spoon in her hand, and she looked up when I walked in. She said, "I made your favorite." She said, "Pot roast." I looked at the pot roast, and I thought about all the pot roasts she had made. I thought about all the dinners we had eaten at that table.
I thought about all the laughter and the arguments and the quiet moments when we just sat and held hands. I said, I cannot eat. I said, I need to go to bed. She said, please do not shut me out. She said, I know I made a terrible mistake, but I am still your wife. I looked at her, and I said, no, you are not.
I said you stopped being my wife 3 years ago when you took me to that lawyer. You stopped being my wife when you lied to me. You stopped being my wife when you chose our son over me. She started crying again, but I did not care. I walked past her, and I went to the bedroom, and I closed the door. I lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The ceiling was white. I had painted it white 15 years ago. I remembered standing on a ladder and rolling the paint, and my wife was on the floor with a drop cloth, and she was laughing at me because I had gotten paint in my hair. That was a good memory. I held on to that memory. I held on to it like a lifeline. I told myself that those years were real. The love was real. The happiness was real. I told myself that even if it all ended this way, that those years still mattered. But I did not believe it. I could not believe it, because if those years had been real, then how could she do this to me? How could she lie to me for 3 years? How could she watch me plan our retirement and talk about our future and dream about our trips and never say a word? How could she kiss me goodnight and hold my hand and tell me she loved me while knowing she was going to take everything away? That was not love. That was something else. That was something dark and cold and calculating. That was something I could not understand. I stayed in the bedroom for 3 days. I did not eat. I did not talk. I just lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling.
My wife knocked on the door a few times. She left trays of food outside. I did not touch them. My son called. My daughter called. I did not answer. I did not want to talk to anyone. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to become nothing. I wanted to be a ghost in my own life. On the 4th day, I got up. I was weak and dizzy, but I got up. I walked to the bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror. I did not recognize the man looking back at me. He was old, he was tired. He had deep lines on his face and dark circles under his eyes, and his hair was completely gray. He looked like a broken man. I was a broken man. I had spent my whole life building, and now I was nothing. I went back to the kitchen. My wife was not there. She had gone to stay with our son. That was the final knife in my chest. She had left. She had packed a bag, and she had walked out the door, and she had gone to the man who had robbed me. She had chosen him. She had chosen him over me. I stood in the kitchen, and I looked at the empty pot on the stove. The pot roast was gone. She had taken it with her. I laughed. I laughed out loud in the empty kitchen. She had taken the pot roast. She had left me nothing, not even the leftovers. I laughed until I started to cry, and then I could not stop crying. I cried for everything. I cried for my house. I cried for my marriage. I cried for my children. I cried for the years I had wasted. I cried for the trust I had given, and the love I had poured out, and the nothing I had gotten in return. I cried until I had no tears left, and then I just stood there in the quiet kitchen with the empty pot and the empty house and the empty life. The 30 days came and went. I did not fight the eviction. I did not have the strength. I packed my things in boxes, my clothes, my books, my old photographs, my tools from the garage. I put them all in my truck. I found a small apartment on the other side of town. It was a 1-bedroom with a view of a parking lot. I moved in alone. I did not tell anyone. I did not have anyone to tell. My wife was gone, my son was gone, my daughter was gone. They had all taken what they wanted from me, and then they had vanished. I set up my recliner in the living room. I put my tools in the closet. I hung my photographs on the walls. I looked at the photographs, and I saw all the faces of the people who had betrayed me. My wife smiling at our wedding, my son holding his diploma, my daughter in her prom dress. I looked at those faces, and I felt nothing. They were strangers. They were people I used to know. They were people I used to love. I did not love them anymore.
I did not love anything. That was 6 months ago. I am sitting here now in this apartment. The recliner is the same, but everything else is different. The sun comes through the window, but it is not the same sun. The coffee is the same, but it does not taste the same.
The paper is the same, but I do not read it anymore. I just sit. I sit and I think about what happened. I think about all the moments I missed. I think about all the red flags I ignored. I think about the look on my wife's face when she told me she loved me. I thought it was love. It was not love. It was survival. She was surviving. She was doing what she had to do to protect her son. And I was the price she was willing to pay. My son called me last week. I answered because I was weak. He said, "Dad, I am sorry for everything." He said, "I sold the house." He said, "I got the money." He said, "I am using it to pay off my debts and save my own family." He said, "I know you will never forgive me, but I hope someday you can understand." I said, "I understand. I understand that you are a coward. I understand that you took everything from me, and you will never give it back. I understand that you destroyed your father for money. I understand that you will carry that guilt for the rest of your life." I said, "That is your punishment, not mine." He started to cry. He said, "I still love you." I said, "You do not. You never did. If you loved me, you would have never done this." He said, "You are wrong." I said, "I am not wrong. I am just old. I am just tired. I am just a man who spent his whole life building something beautiful and watched it burn in front of him." I hung up. I have not called him back. I will not call him back. My wife called too. She said she wants to see me. She said she misses me.
She said she made a terrible mistake. I said, "You made a choice. You chose him. You chose him every day for 3 years. You chose him when you kissed me goodnight and lied to me. You chose him when you took me to that lawyer. You chose him when you left me alone in that empty house. You cannot undo a choice like that." She said, "Please." She said, "We can work through this." I said, "There is nothing to work through. The marriage is over. The house is gone. The trust is gone. I am gone. You made sure of that." She cried. I listened to her cry, and I felt nothing. I felt less than nothing. I felt like a hollow man in a hollow room with a hollow life. The grandkids do not call. I do not expect them to. They are young. They do not understand. They do not know what their parents did. And even if they did, they would not care. They have their own lives. They have their own futures. I am just an old man in an apartment. I am just a memory. I am just someone they used to visit on holidays. I think about them sometimes. I think about the little girl who used to sit on my lap and ask me to tell her stories. I think about the little boy who used to ride on my shoulders and laugh at the top of his lungs. I think about all the times I held them and kissed them and told them I loved them. They will never know how much I loved them. They will never know how much it hurts to lose them. The holidays are coming. I do not know what I will do. I do not have anywhere to go. I do not have anyone to see.
I will probably sit in this apartment and eat a sandwich and watch the television. I will probably think about all the Christmases I used to have, all the trees I used to decorate, all the presents I used to wrap, all the laughter I used to hear. I will probably cry. I cry a lot now. I cry in the morning when I wake up and remember where I am. I cry at night when I close my eyes and see their faces. I cry in the parking lot of the grocery store when I see an old man with his wife. I cry when I drive past the house. I drove past it once. I did not stop. I just drove slow and looked at it. It looked the same. The white siding, the black shutters, the garden. But there was a for sale sign in the yard. My son had sold it. My son had sold my house, my life, my everything. I drove away and I did not look back. I am not angry anymore. Anger takes too much energy. I am just tired. I am tired of thinking about it. I am tired of reliving it. I am tired of wondering what I did wrong. I know what I did wrong. I trusted. I trusted people who did not deserve it. I trusted my wife. I trusted my son. I trusted my daughter. I trusted the people I loved, and they used that trust to destroy me. That is my crime. That is my sin. I loved too much, and I trusted too easily, and I paid the price. Sometimes I think about the table, the oak table I built in 1987. I wonder where it is now. I wonder if the new owners kept it. I wonder if they use it.
I wonder if they eat their meals on it, and laugh and cry and hold hands and make memories the way my family used to. I hope they do. I hope that table brings someone joy. I hope it holds someone's happiness, because it held mine. It held all of mine. And now it is gone, and I am gone, and there is nothing left. I am sitting here in my recliner, the same recliner, the same coffee cup, the same morning paper that I do not read. The sun is coming through the window. It is a Tuesday. Nothing special about it. The phone is on the end table. It does not ring. It will not ring. No one calls me anymore. I am alone. I will be alone. I will die alone. That is the truth. That is the ending. That is the story. My name is not important. My age is not important. What is important is that you understand. You understand that family is not a guarantee. Love is not a guarantee. Trust is not a guarantee. The people you love the most are the ones who can hurt you the worst, and they will. They will hurt you, and they will walk away, and they will not look back. I know this now. I know it because I lived it. I lived it every single day for 68 years, and then I watched it all fall apart. I do not know if I will ever forgive them. I do not know if I want to. I do not know if forgiveness even matters anymore. What matters is that I am here. I am alive. I am breathing. I am still standing. I am broken. I am hollow. I am nothing, but I am still standing, and that is all I have left.